listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Billy Z.
I'm Justin Allen.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Matt Broussard.
And we're going to come at you tonight with a very quick episode. It's been a long week. I just returned back from the amazing C2E2 in Chicago, and someone on the call has watched a certain movie that begins with B and ends with E. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and we've been a bit strapped for time, but we wanted to stick to our weekly schedule, so we're getting a quick one out to you. We also recorded one last week, which we haven't released yet, which was the old tribe of myself, Bryan, and Justin. You'll be hearing that next week as part of next week's episode, but we're getting an episode out to you quick. Let me talk to you quickly about C2E2. As a lot of people know, I've been a very active member of the 11 O'Clock Comics board for a number of years. This has long been the home convention for the board members. I missed last year, was very happy to return this year, and I am wiped out. It's been 2 days since I've come back, and I am wiped out. So if you ever have a chance to go to Chicago to have this particular convention, reach out to me, and you will have a very vibrant social life for the 4 days that you were there. So I also recorded a podcast while I was out there. Our good friend Wendy Freeman from Double Page Spread, who is to date the only female guest that's ever appeared on this show, a bit of trivia, with bunch of other people. I'll reveal those guests when you listen to her show. Very drunkenly talking about comics from the 90s that were good, so I will definitely provide a link up to that. And I don't want to bore people with details about what I did and who I saw at the convention itself. There's evidence of that all online. But one thing I did attend was the panel on Archer and Armstrong, which is written by Rafer Roberts with art by David LaFuente. They recently relaunched this Valiant book at #1. I'm thrilled I actually have a Valiant book that I can talk about, but I don't feel right being the one to bring it in myself, so I'm going to throw that to Mr. Steve. Steve, what did you think of the full title of the book, A&A, The Adventures of Archer and Armstrong #1?
Well, I loved it. Just to kind of give a little bit of background with myself and Archer and Armstrong, I really have not been following the revamped Archer and Armstrong series that launched just shortly after Valiant had their major relaunch a couple of years ago. And it was mostly because I wasn't too familiar with the characters back in the 90s. And I kind of gravitated, towards the books that I had read previously when Valiant did its relaunch. So I kind of missed that whole first wave of Archer and Armstrong books. However, through, of course, Valiant's great planning and plotting, they've actually shown up a couple times in a couple of the other books that I've read. They show up briefly in Unity. They, of course, show up all over the place in Ivar Time Walker and in the recent Dead Drop miniseries. So I was like, I was curious. And through the recommendation of Mr. Bill Zanowitz, I decided to go ahead and pick it up. And I was not unhappy with it. It is incredible. And, of course, for those of you who follow us, any chance that we get to post a picture of Armstrong semi-naked or mostly naked, wishing everybody happy Valentine's Day is something that comes up very often on our Facebook page. This book does not disappoint if you're looking for bearish images of Armstrong, and that's thanks to the art of David LaFuente. But what I really want to draw your attention to is the story by Rafer Roberts as well. It is hilarious within the first issue, and again, because I'm not too familiar with the characters, I didn't really know what to expect going in, other than what I had read in Ivar and Dead Drop, and I guess they did a crossover with as part of the Delinquents miniseries with Quantum and Woody. I got the characters right away, and I think that's really a testament to the writing in this, is that the characters were just easy to pick up, to understand, and Roberts just ran with them. And you get the wackiness, you get the craziness. Archer, you get his very odd speaking style, which I think is very consistent actually in all of his appearances that I've seen. And then of course you get the completely absurd situation of the essential plot of this particular issue, where Armstrong owns this magic bag that apparently is holds everything, and they decide to. Or at least Archer decides to go after Armstrong, because Armstrong has apparently disappeared into the bag, and there's this huge, massive sort of miniature dimension inhabited by a whole bunch of strange creatures that seems to live inside this bag. And it is a wild romp. And for first issue, it really does not let up in the humor, the wackiness. LaFuente's art is goofy but funny, and of course Armstrong, for some reason, no matter how you draw him, still comes up as pretty enticing. But anyway, I just I thought it was a lot of fun, and even not knowing or being too familiar with some of the other satellite characters here, I'm starting to learn very quickly who they are. And again, within a 22-page comic, that's actually a pretty good thing to do. Or a pretty amazing thing to be able to do to get you really invested. And I'm definitely invested in the long haul for this. So hopefully it continues with the pace.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was a remarkably well-written first issue. And the Archer and Armstrong backstory, I feel so weird talking about this about Valiant, because it's the one book that I have read out of New Valiant, apart from Book of Death, which I think I didn't necessarily lose interest, but had to pare things down. So I think I was up to around 11 or 12 issues of the first series before I went. It's a very different series in tone. It's much more grounded in a more serious vibe than this particular book. But there's a lot of consistency through in terms of how fun-loving Armstrong is. You don't see too much of that in the first issue, apart from the flashback in 1953, how Archer is so by the book. And, up until his encounter with Armstrong for the first time, lived a very sheltered life. I absolutely loved when Archer is fighting that there are the definitions of how he fights. Steve, you know what I mean? Where he applies a judo chop, and you have judo, a form of martial arts known for throwing one's opponent. Straight punch is used in most ones. It was so nice, and with some of the most convoluted elements of Archer and Armstrong, like Archer's sister, who was the head of the Sisters of Perpetual Darkness, which has this symbiotic relationship with a lot of elements within the past of A&A, in both this and the early Valiant series. I thought his introduction to their world was, you only really needed that one intro inside cover page, and you were set. You didn't need to have any other information apart from what Rafer had provided in the very quick write-up. There is, on top of this, a new element to A&A, which has his first appearance in this one, and that is Davy the Mackerel. Which
makes a very strange appearance. It's almost like a blink and you'll miss it one page kind of thing, but it's hilarious.
It's hilarious, and again, I went to the panel about the launch of Archer and Armstrong, and this character will become a much more important character as the series goes on. Now, what they did at this panel was really inventive. Instead of, just leading with what went behind the original pitch and they decided to read parts of the script from the first issue, with Rafer Roberts, the writer, doing Davy the Mackerel, and man, it was the voice I heard. It was Rodney Dangerfield delivering those lines. And it was so good. I will say that we were treated to a number of things that are upcoming in this series. And I will have to say, given their reaction to another series, which Archer is part of, Faith, that The cover of Archer and Armstrong, the main cover, I have to say, because God knows this is Valiant, the main cover of Archer and Armstrong #5 will blow your socks off, Matt and Steve, respectively. I do believe.
Cool.
Ooh,
And
my socks, they're getting loose. I can feel it.
okay, and there are also some other things going on in the Archer and Armstrong world. They introduced a beer at C2E2 at one of the after parties, specifically brewed for Archer and Armstrong. There is an audio series which premiered on this March 16th, which you can access from iTunes, Amazon, and Audible, which basically pretty much dominated by the original New Valiant Archer and Armstrong. One thing I also have to say about this book, and Steve, tell me if you agree, that the colors in this book it's a stunning job. And the gentleman's name is Bryan Reber.
Mm-hmm.
And there were just some really nice touches, specifically when Archer was dealing with the inhabitants of Armstrong's bag. Just some really, really sweet choices.
Well, it's funny because it's definitely a very animated style, and the colors really kind of, it almost brings out that 80s Saturday morning cartoon feel, especially when he's dealing with the, I guess they're the little goblins that live in the bag. But it's fun, and it adds to a lot of the brightness, that's kind of naturally coming out in the art. But yeah, it's a fun romp, and I think this whole book was put together extremely well. A lot of good choices made here.
Okay, cool. Now, Matt, you were reading another Valiant book, which you have decided to give a particular twist in terms of how you're going to pronounce the title from now on, right?
Yeah, well, every time I go to pick up my pull list, the guys at Legends Comics here in Victoria always refer to it as Ninjak, and I think that there was a storyline not too long ago in the book where they actually explained some of the origin of the ninja program, and there's something about that rang a bell. So yeah, I'm gonna call this Ninjak from now on. I think it sounds better than Ninjak.
Okay, I will agree.
But my enjoyment for Ninjak wasn't as high as usual. I'm not really loving this Dead Side adventure that they're doing. It's a little too tame. After what happened in Book of Death, I was hoping that it was going to be focused a little bit more on Mr. Dark. Instead, we've gotten an introduction of Shadow Man, or a reintroduction of Shadow Man, I should say, which is good. I'm down with that. The new design for him looks cool. And I like seeing the story progress for that character, but otherwise this was a bit of a miss, this story arc. Despite the fact that Doug Breathwaite on art is, it's amazing. The other Valiant book, though, that came out this week that I enjoyed a little bit more was Wrath of the Eternal Warrior #5, which is actually one of the brothers of Armstrong, and he's going through this bizarre adventure since he supposedly died in Book of Death, and as of the last issue, we were teased with a reveal that Gilad isn't necessarily climbing out of the bowels of hell, but rather unplugging himself from some sort of virtual dream state that was induced in some sort of weird laboratory. And readers like me have been eager to learn what is going on with that, but the creators decided to keep us in suspense for a few more months by doing a flashback to Gilad's days fighting barbarians. And the artist on this arc is somebody different. It's an artist named Juan Jose Rip, and his work is impressive. It's very dense and textured and reminds me a lot of the artwork from Jason Burrows, but it's a very violent issue, and it kind of throws off the tone of the book a little bit. And despite the splash pages, most of this issue didn't really work for me. I'm still a huge fan of the book, and I can't wait to see where it goes, but I'm sort of, being impatient about this arc wrapping up, because I can't wait to see what's going on with Gilad in his present. So that was my dip into Valiant's books this week.
Okay. Steve, did you dip into the same books as well?
Actually, I did. I actually read both of them, which is awesome. With Ninja K, because now I'm going to start saying that too, because it's fun. The only reason that I started picking up those books, or this title at all, was because of the Dead Side crossover. And, I'm a big fan of Punk Mambo. I thought she was a really great, unique, interesting character to bring into the Valiant universe when she appeared in Shadow Man for the first time. I'm kind of disagreeing, but also kind of agreeing there with Matt that it is a relatively tame story, with moments of extreme violence and a lot of prose. I mean, this is a very, very talky storyline. A lot of that conversation happens to be from the reintroduction of the Shadow Man character, sort of being very dramatic about his interactions with different denizens on the dead side, because he has to collect. We find out that he's being forced to collect all of these mystical artifacts for Master Dark, even though Master Dark is no longer there. It's just something that he's being tortured and tasked with that he has to complete. And he'll show up somewhere, kill a whole bunch of people, and then they would just wax poetic for about 4 pages to talk about, why he feels the way he does and why he's doing the things that he does. And, I think that the pace kind of gets cut up a little bit. And thankfully we're almost to the end. It's a 4-part series, and I think the 4th issue comes out, I want to say maybe next week, which would be the 30th. But yeah, Matt, I'm kind of with you on this one. I really love being able to see the Dead Side again, and I love Shadow Man and having him reintroduced this way. But it just, Ninjak is taking a back seat in his own book, which is just kind of strange. And Punk Mambo doesn't really get a big chance to shine either.
So this issue that I read is number 13, and it's issue 4 of 4.
Oh, so it is the 4th one. Okay, so I must not have read the 4th one yet.
Yeah, and I had a feeling that it was over. Not that there was a lot of closure to it, but they sort of all jump through a portal and end up back home. So I figured that was probably the end of that. Though there's
end.
There's a lot of emphasis on Shadow Man, like steaming evil fumes in prison. So when you were saying, there's another issue coming, I was like, oh, it could be about Shadow Man back in the world, but no, I think it's over.
It is okay. So they did make it back, and everybody's, I guess, back to whatever default they are in Ninja K. And unfortunately, really, even though I did have some interest in this book for the storyline, once I read the next issue, once I read issue 13, I think I'm going back off the title. So, oh well,
There's lots more to check out. There's always Imperium,
which I love. Yes, I love Imperium.
Juicy, twisted, weirdo book.
I'm sorry. Once they introduced sort of like the human parts, alarm / booby trap / weapon on the Harada satellite up in space at Live Rider. Like, I'm just that whole sequence in not the latest issue, but I think the previous issue released in February. They Livewire leads a team of hardcore up into space to take down one of Harada's satellites, and there's this thing in a box that just so happens to be made of people parts, and you're just sort of it's so disturbing and so bizarre, and that's just something that you expect when you read this book, that you're going to come up with that there's something that's going to happen that's just body horror or freakish or really mind-bending. Like the entire Vine storyline was just crazy. You're rooting for essentially what are the bad guy invader pod people in the book.
What's the name of the character that does those terrible, terrible science experiments?
It's an alien sort of explorer / scientist that's taken over the body of one of the Psiots, and just for no reason decided to eliminate her eyes. It just decided to smooth over the part of her face for no reason, and she's been doing some really nasty experiments with this pregnant woman that they revealed a couple issues ago. That was just so disturbing.
She's basically the Krieger of Imperium. If you were to map Archer against Imperium, she's the Krieger. And all of her experiments are like, oh, that's very inventive. Oh, but it's so wrong.
Okay.
It's so wrong.
Well, something I have to say is if you're enjoying our Valiant talk, stay tuned over the next few weeks because we have some really, really good surprises for you. But it's not the only imprint that's on the stands, or in this case, on your apps and devices. So, Justin, I understand you've been reading one particular digital comic.
Yeah, there's been a series called the Infinity Entity. It takes place between the events of Thanos, the Infinity Relativity. It's the original graphic novel that came out about a year ago from Jim Starlin on Marvel. And then there's a new one coming out later this year, Thanos, the Infinity Finale, original graphic novel. And this, the Infinity Entity is dealing with Adam Warlock. And it kind of goes into what makes him him. That we've had so many different versions and so many different retcons over the years. And this is kind of, I think they're trying to streamline everything, taking all his pasts and all the different stories and merging them into one. You've got Jim Starlin who writes, you don't get a better Warlock writer than Jim Starlin. And what's great about this is it's a 3-issue series, and it's got Alan Davis pencils. And it is some of these images that they've been having, or I'm sorry, some of the passages some of the classic Avenger scenes. Alan Davis draws classic Avengers like you wouldn't believe. Like, we were talking the original lineup of the Green Hulk and classic Thor. They look amazing.
Green Thor sounds awesome.
Yeah. But, Alan Davis, sometimes I forget just how great this guy can draw when you're looking at kind of a 60s, 70s retro style. Just absolutely fantastic. But then, you go and he draws, from one panel, he's drawing classic 60s Avengers. Then he's drawing current Guardians of the Galaxies, and they look fantastic. So it's a tribute to him and his style, how great of a job he does. If you're liking Cosmic and you like the characters of like the In-Betweener and Adam Warlock and Thanos, of course, this series is fantastic. It's all done, and it's all going to be wrapped up in 3 issues. It's not going to be one of these long, drawn out Infinity sagas like they have been done in the past. Can
I correct you on that, Justin?
Yes,
but this isn't necessarily a big correction. It is now one of 4, but it was originally solicited as one of 3.
Okay. I apologize.
So initially
it's still
was
coming
3.
up 3 in my
right.
book,
Initially
so.
it was 3,
okay.
And then they expanded the story, and it's coming out weekly. It appears.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have the first 2. So yeah. I mean, I did not know that it got expanded to 4. So
yeah,
right.
no, but it was. You can even see it on the covers here that this was one of 3, and somewhere along the line they made it a 4 issue. So
okay, yeah, because I'm looking at the app right now, and it says 2, so 3. So
yes.
All right, cool. Well, that's good then, because it's a good story. If it's not drug out for any good reason. But anyway, I've been reading the Thanos, the Infinity Revelation, and then the Infinity Entity. I'm looking forward to this. This is it's been great seeing that some of this cosmos or the cosmic universe again. And when it's done well, it's a great read. So if you guys get a chance to read these, I say go for it.
Yeah, at C2E2 there was a girl who went as the Infinity Gauntlet. And it was a really cute costume, but boy,
That's cool.
She could not see shit.
Oh, I bet. That'd
She
be
was
horrible.
walking into everything. It was pretty cool. I just wouldn't mind going round robin what you guys think of Starlin. Because I think apart from Bryan talking about, we really haven't talked too much about Jim Starlin on this show.
I think he's one of those classic creators.
Yeah.
I don't know anything negative about him. I think that, what he does, like when he sticks to what he does, I'm talking, Thanos and Adam Warlock and, Infinity stuff. I think he does it well. I've enjoyed most of what I've read by him.
Mm-hmm.
And when he's paired with like a great penciler like Ron Lim, or especially Ron Lim, I mean, I think when I think of him, those two go together for me. But like Alan Davis, his work comes out fantastic.
Yeah. As an artist, Matt, what do you think of Starlin as an artist?
I certainly prefer his older stuff to what he makes now. I think, much like our discussion of Neil Adams, there is a benefit to the flatness of the old way of printing comics that worked really well for artists like Jim Starlin and Neil Adams. They have wildly different styles, but both of them, I think, look better flatter. And every time I see their work inked for modern comics where there's all this sort of artificial depth applied through the digital inking process, it always just kind of looks funny to me. Like they're trying to take a 2D idea and make a 3D model out of it. And I think his aesthetic is best with sort of like the cosmic sort of cheese factor, flat, retro comic. So I do like a lot of his work, but I think a lot of these more recent projects that he's been doing with Marvel, where they're trying to make it look like just anybody in their team of artists doing current work, it just doesn't quite look right. It looks like a conflict between the aesthetic of a very talented and very experienced illustrator from another age of comics, trying to force his work to fit the current aesthetic. And I think it would look great if they flattened out all the shading and just left it the way it is, because he's super amazing at depicting these characters, and he loves working with Adam Warlock and Thanos and all those guys.
Steve, anything to add there?
Well, I kind of feel that same way. Jim Starlin, for me, was a very specific era of comics that I was reading.
Yeah. And by the time you were reading him, he was primarily a writer and had really was not doing too much art past Dreadstar, I guess, on a regular basis was probably the last series. I know he's done Breed and some other things for vanity imprints like Bravura, but it really was, at the time that you were probably reading with the Infinities and, even stretching to things, so far off the mark, like his run on Batman, probably best exemplified by Death in the Family. He's primarily a writer by the time you were into books, yeah.
Exactly, and, but I remember him best from the cosmic side of Marvel, because of course, I got introduced to him with the first Infinity Gauntlet, which I loved, and I think he and Ron Lim did a really good job together, sort of creating that look. It was a very specific look for Thanos, for sort of the cosmic side of Marvel. It really kind of played together. And of course, Ron Lim was also the artist for a long time on Silver Surfer, and I think he did covers for Quasar a couple times. So he just kind of had that look that defined early '90s cosmic Marvel. But Jim Starlin, I had read some of Dreadstar, definitely not the whole thing. A lot of that at that point was hard to get a hold of. But I don't know. I think that type of talking about Jim Starlin as a writer, but also a little bit, his work aesthetically. I don't know if I would have described it as flat, probably because I don't have that eye, that artist's eye, but it is decidedly 80s, and I don't know how else to describe it. It's decidedly, it's very much something that I would expect to see in comics work in the 80s. Not to say that's not good. It is good work.
It's
but
dated.
I think it is dated. It is very dated. Even down to sort of the creativity that he has. And he has quite a bit of creativity. When you're dealing with a cosmic subject or a cosmic book, there's usually a lot of chances there for the artist to go wild with the looks of alien species and starships and planets and architecture. And I don't think he's really changed his style since Dreadstar in the 80s.
Yeah, I'd agree with that from what we've seen from the pen of.
Yeah, and for better or worse, I mean, it's good. It's just, he found his I guess his style, his look, and hasn't really developed past that. Which again, a lot of artists that are that iconic have that particular look.
Yeah.
That you can look at and say, oh, that is that person. That is that person.
I also do think that, like John Byrne, I think he's an artist that isn't complimented. Well, I shouldn't say complimented, but isn't best served by inking themselves. Because if you look at some of the beautiful Joe Rubinstein inking jobs that you saw in the 70s with his runs on Warlock and Captain Marvel, it's just one of those things like Byrne and Austin or Neil Adams and Dick Giordano, just a really nice marriage of two different abilities. And that's the stuff I'm in with a lot with what Matt said. I think those were craftsmen that knew the printing techniques of the time and knew how to cater to them. And there is something off since for quite a while now at this point. But, look how many tropes that he's responsible for that are part of Marvel's media well outside comics now,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So, Justin, thank you for bringing that up. That's a nice treat. And that wasn't anything that wasn't even really on my radar. I saw the solicits initially and thought, well, here's another project where they collected a lot of Alan Davis that'll be released because that's what he's been doing. Savage Hulk came out in one bit, and that Avengers crossover that was through the annuals and Avengers Prime, it seems that they do stockpile a lot of his stuff and then shoot it out at once. I've never seen it weekly before though, but it's Alan Davis to me is like always an artist. It's like, oh, it's like an old friend who's still around,
Right.
kind of vibe. And despite what people report back at conventions, what he's like, at least the depictions that we get from his art puts me in that kind of place, so. So good. Well, like we said, this is going to be a very short one, so we're moving right on to our final segment, which is the Woofs of the Week segment. Don't worry, folks. We can talk for hours, just not tonight. Tune back in next week. We'll have much more for you. But again, we're bridging it tonight, so we're moving right on to the Woofs of the Week. And I just talked to Justin. So, Justin, why don't you tell me, we'll start off with you, what is your Woof of the Week?
My Woof of the Week is going to be something that's coming up, volunteering. It's our local animal shelter, Pets Come First. You guys have heard me over the years talk about some of the dogs that we foster, the senior dogs, and that we help out with. They have their annual dog jog. I've helped out with over the years. I was not able last year because of one of my knee replacements, but this year I'm going to be going. We're going to be doing this. It is April 30th, Saturday, April 30th. It's a 5K run. I will not be running. I'll be walking it. But it is Saturday, April 30th. If anybody would ever feel like donating any kind of money or donating any supplies or anything like that, you can go to their website at petscomefirst.net. Any kind of donation would be grateful. But like I said, I'm going to be doing this, and these guys are important to me. I wish that we could get more people to help out with the old dogs, and it's sad seeing these old guys and old ladies in the homes that have been, they've been in their homes their whole entire life, and then have to get surrendered into shelters, when they're, 12, 13 years old, and it's sad. So try to do my best to give as many dogs as I can a good life. So anyway, Dog Jug 2016 next month.
Okay, great. Very nice to hear something like that. Mr. Steve, how about you? What is your wolf of the week?
Well, it's definitely not as heartwarming as providing a home for elderly dogs, because that is a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful cause as well. So this is actually, of course, what people come to expect. Another TV recommendation, and this is one that is actually it's a pretty serious subject, and surprisingly is very well handled, I think, in spite of the fact that it's on Freeform, which is is the new name for the former ABC Family Channel, and it's called Recovery Road. And I honestly love it, and I think that Bear fans of the show would probably are loving it because of Daniel Francisi, who is one of the main characters and residents of the halfway house. That's basically the namesake for the show, Recovery Road. The show itself focuses on a teenage girl who is struggling with the fact that, coming to the realization that she is an addict, and through the course of the series, you're seeing how bad it actually was for her, being told through flashbacks. But at the same time, and I think to the writer's credit and to the showmaker's credit, they also show the other residents of the house, and you get to know them as much as you get to know the ostensible main character of the show through flashbacks on their addictions and their recovery through different flashbacks, as well as different focuses on each person. And I highly recommend it if you know anybody who has gone through addiction, or if you've done it yourself. I mean, obviously this is not as hard hitting as something that you might see on like the Discovery Channel or TLC or something that really goes into addiction, or I'd say depression porn. But this is very moving and very emotional, fictional telling of this kind of struggle. So Recovery Road, I recommend it.
Okay. Matt, how about you? What is your wolf of the week?
Well, this weekend I went to go see the latest mystery film from J.J. Abrams. And it was playing in the smallest theater downtown, while whatever the latest Divergent series movie was playing in the main theater, which kind of surprised me because, I mean, J.J. Abrams just, made money hand over fist with the new Star Wars, so I thought somehow this would be a bigger deal than it was, but that said, I had a really fun time. I get the impression that I'm not the target audience for this movie, because if John Goodman kidnapped me and made me scrambled eggs and wanted to play board games and live together in a cute little bunker, I'd be like, hell yes, you cuddly stack of pancakes. So I don't know what's wrong with the rest of the audience. But anyways, this was a chance for John Goodman to totally do Kathy Bates in Misery, which is also working for me. And I mean, everybody's curious about how this fits into the namesake Cloverfield, and I could go on a 2-hour rant about how misleading that title is, because you will sit here for 2 hours and wonder what the connection is, and maybe even leave the theater and go, there was no connection. But that said, it's sort of a remix of very familiar ideas from J.J. Abrams, and not in a bad way. It's just that sort of that playful, I'm gonna include weird little details that pop up in other stuff, like Slusho, the Slurpee company that's in basically everything J.J. Abrams does. And there were probably lots of other Easter eggs, though I'm hard-pressed to identify them all, having only seen it once. I would recommend it. I think it's fun. Don't go to see it thinking that you're going to get some sort of closure about Cloverfield. That's not really what it's for, but it's great.
Okay. Well, for my wolf of the week, I have to go back to C2E2 to one of my acquisitions. This is a book I've been searching for a long time at a sensible price. And it is Brave and the Bold, number 65 which was released in May. Well, the cover date was May 1966, so that probably would have meant March 1966, well before any of us were born on this show. And when you hit 60s comics, you get a lot of weirdness, and some of them are a bit hard to get through. And this one featured the Flash and the Doom Patrol in a team up where there's absolutely no reason for these characters to be together, but there's such a charm to the storytelling, the sense of, it's almost as if the editors say, okay, Flash and Doom Patrol put together a story, and they had like a leftover Doom Patrol story and just tried to fit the Flash into it. Basically, the core of the story is the Brotherhood of Evil, who are the Doom Patrol's main enemies, kidnap Negative Man, and the Flash impersonates Negative Man to dupe the Brotherhood of Evil into thinking that they didn't actually kidnap him. It makes no sense, but there's a lot of charm to it, and I also have to just give a reference here to the cover, which anyone can see, which is by Bruno Preminani, who was the regular artist on Doom Patrol. He didn't draw this series, this particular issue. This issue was drawn by Dick Giordano. But it's one of the weirdest depictions of the Flash, and I love it. He's like kind of overweight, and the things on the sides of his ears on the mask are just well off, and it's Silver Age goodness in its badness. So that is my Woof of the Week if you seek it out. Brave and the Bold number 65. An interesting tidbit about this book, it has never been reprinted, and most of the Brave and the Bold run from the team-ups into where Batman took over the team-ups, a lot of it's been reprinted, at least going into the 70s. This is one book for some reason that just never has. So that's my Woof of the Week.
Questions?
Yeah.
Is it absolutely necessary to put the old man in the wheelchair in chains? Like, he doesn't seem the most physically imposing of the whole group there. And also, I didn't know that Ms. Marvel was in the Doom Patrol.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, Elastigirl was the precursor to that. Yeah. And
that's Elastigirl.
That's Elastigirl, yeah. Which she doesn't really use powers like that in most of the Doom Patrol run.
Does she usually become a giant?
She usually becomes a giant, yes.
Okay.
For some reason, it's just her arm becoming a giant here. There's a lot of weirdness to this story. There you go.
That is the ugliest Flash I think I've ever seen in my life.
Isn't it weird? It's just, it's almost like it was another character,
old.
and they he's got like a lot of heft to him.
A Liefeld chest.
And he's also got like one red glove and one orangish glove.
Well,
yeah, it's yeah. And you almost think that's like Plastic Man as the rocket in the back with, I guess, like the Virgin Mary on top of it. It's so weird, but it's so wonderfully weird. So,
it's weird that the monkey looks, or the gorilla looks the best out of all of it.
He looks terrifying. That's Monsieur Mosella or
Monsieur
whatever.
Mala.
Monsieur Mala, yeah.
Monsieur Mala, who was in love with the brain. What was the brain name? What was the name for that?
Simon? No, it wasn't Simon.
No, it was. Maybe it was just the brain.
Yeah, I think his name was Hans Horst. It was a German name. I think that's what it was. And then later, just that beautiful twist on this when Morrison transformed them into the Brotherhood of Dada.
Oh my God, the Brotherhood of Dada. That was my introduction to Doom Patrol.
Oh my God, what an introduction!
Yeah, that was exactly what my introduction was. Back when I started branching out of my Vertigo reading from Sandman to other things, where I found Silver Scarab and then of course Doom Patrol, and I'm like, what the fuck is this book? It makes absolutely no sense, but it's really awesome, and the art for that whole story arc, especially the cover art, was incredible, and I don't know who drew it, but loved it so much.
Are you talking about the ones with the Dada?
Oh God, yeah, where he's running for president.
Well, the collections all have Brian Boland covers. I can't remember who did the original though.
Yeah, and I think it was Richard Case who was the artist on that.
Oh yeah.
It was incredible. And the interiors, too. The interiors were just so psychedelically weird.
I wanted to say that there isn't any point in the Doom Patrol where you can, jump into it and not just have your mind blown. Mm-hmm. I think I started with an Eric Larson issue where they all end up in some weird dreamscape that's made out of, like, monster body parts and thorns and fire and stuff, and they all fake die, and then they're not dead at the end. And the whole thing was just like, what?
I remember I had a friend who really loved 60s comics, and the first time he sampled the Morrison run was the issue where Paris was trapped in the painting.
Yeah.
And the Justice League were just like throwing their hands up like, we got to call you guys because you're used to the weird shit. You know, he's like, it's like this beloved thing he had, when he was growing up in the 60s. He's like, what the fuck is this?
Well, it's so weird because the Doom Patrol were always touted as sort of like the DC answer, or the DC version, I guess, of X-Men.
Yeah, they basically emerge at the same time. It's one of those weird things where, like Swamp Thing and Man Thing were like concurrent, and
yeah, but Swamp Thing was so much cooler. But the thing with Doom Patrol though is that I don't know how you can even compare Doom Patrol to X-Men. Sure, X-Men has a whole bunch of like just crazy ridiculous storylines that make no sense and weird mutant origins that defy logic. But I think Zorn, speaking of Morrison again, kind of embodies that. But Doom Patrol, I mean, from the beginning was just...
The 60s books are twisted. But the one thing that's beautiful about the 60s books is if you're a Marvel fan, I think that's the one series from the 60s where you can latch onto it. Because, the writer, excuse me, it wasn't Bob Haney, it was Arnold Drake. Bob Haney wrote this story that I was talking about, but Arnold Drake was a fan of what Stan Lee was doing. And it's kind of like almost a DC take on what Marvel was doing, but like the villains they fight, the animal, mineral, vegetable man, and they're just so weird. They're so weird. And, plus, I mean, this isn't a spoiler for anybody who's seen them there's been various tropes on this take. The end of the series is the end of the Doom Patrol, without giving too many spoilers. Wow, we talked a lot about Doom Patrol. We should do that again sometime because it's fun. But not right now. Right now, we're going to wrap up this episode. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. You can listen to us through iTunes, through Stitcher Radio, through Podbean, and some other sources. And if you want to send something to us, do so via email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. So until next week, I'm Billy Z.
I'm Justin Allen.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Matt Broussard.
You're going to hear a woof and an explosion. Again, we'll be back next week. Take care, everyone.
Woof! Deborah was a Catholic girl. She held out to the bitter end. Carla was a different type. She's the one who put it in. Mary was a black girl, and I was afraid of a girl like that. Susan painted pictures sitting down like the Buddha sat. Reno was an aimless girl, a geographic memory. Kathy was a Jesus freak, she liked that kind of misery. Vicky had this special way of turning sex into a song. Kamala, who couldn't sing, kept the beat, kept it strong.